don't know why the record button wasn't showing. Okay, there we go.
Okay. Oh, can you able screen sharing too?
Yes, sorry. Okay, should be good now.
Okay, perfect. All right. So I read Eliza and Her Monsters, and it's about like this girl, Eliza. She's a senior in high school, and she created this really successful web comic called Monsters C, or what was it called? Yeah, Monstrous C. And it's super successful, but this is like the author of the book, but this is just like the format that it was written in. But it's like super successful, but like she keeps her identity that she's like the author a secret from everyone besides her parents. And she's super shy in school. She struggles with like social anxiety, and then she meets this boy who transfers in, Wallace, and like they become friends. They become kind of like interested in one another, and then but like the whole time she doesn't tell him that she's the author, and he's like a huge fan of this web comic. And then like on graduation, her parents like want to like share something that she did great, so they share that she's the author of this without her permission, because they didn't know that she was keeping it a secret. And then like her whole world kind of does a 180, and like her teachers are fans of it and all this stuff. And then she has to go to therapy because she's just like she cannot go to school anymore. She gets diagnosed with anxiety, she goes through like the treatment, and then she ends up like fixing everything with this kid Wallace and like all of her relationships, and it ends up being a happy ending. But yeah, like so each chapter was kind of formatted differently. So one of the chapters, it was like a user profile, and then it was like just like I don't know, so it would just like give a user profile, and then another section was like forum chats, which is basically like this whole section like with the dates down here. And so it's like her and her online friends like communicating with one another. And then it also had like paragraph form too, so then I just like wrote the rest of it in paragraphs. But yeah, and then like they had like images from her web comic like throughout the book too, so I included one of those. And then some quotes. I'll just choose like one quote that stuck out to me. um I kind of like this one, like broken people don't hide from their monsters, broken people let themselves be eaten. And it's kind of like her monsters are kind of like her struggles and anxieties, and then like she ends up like facing it all. So that was kind of like the theme of the book. And then these are just like character descriptions. There weren't a lot of characters in the book, but just like a kind of rundown about Eliza, rundown about Wallace. And then I already explained like all the key events in a summary. And then I just said like the way like adolescents can connect to this is because like a lot of kids, especially now, more are struggling with anxiety and depression. And so like having Eliza's perspective about it and like hearing her side of going through high school dealing with this, I think a lot of students can relate to. And like how she says like she feels like free when she's just like looking at her computer screen like on the internet, like that's when she's most comfortable. And so again, like nowadays I think a lot of students can relate to that. And then like with the was this format like what did I say? Was this format effective? I said it was because it broke up the text, but it also like connected how like Eliza's real life to like what she put into her web comic and like the stories with that. So overall, it was a really good book. But I was not like personally, I was not a fan of like reading this format. I think I'd rather just have like normal paragraphs. But I think a lot of like students would appreciate this with like the illustrations and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel like the formats of these books can be like a little much to handle. Like I'm a college student and like with my book, like I was almost struggling like dealing with the format because it's just so different to what you're used to. So I feel like there's a fine line between like a good format and something that's like not really understandable. And it's kind of like an issue with these books, I noticed.
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, any other notes on this before I just stop sharing?
Um,
It was interesting how yours had a bunch of different like styles it was in, because mine was like
Mhm.
strictly an interview.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah,
it's interesting to have multiple different formats in one book.
definitely. Yeah, I've never read something like this.
I think
Yeah,
it
like,
would
was
get
that hard?
complicated.
Yeah, was that
Um,
hard to read, like the switching back and forth?
Yeah, like you definitely get used to it, but at first I was like like especially with the web forums, like they like these are like this was like Wallace's online like screen name and then this was like Eliza's. So like differentiating between like the characters versus like their screen names was probably like the hardest part. But everything else was fantastic.
Did it have a lot of visuals?
Yeah, like probably every 3 or 4 chapters they would have like an illustration, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
Are we moving on to the next one, or do we have to go over these questions for part 2?
We can do part
Mhm.
2 at the end because isn't that what we did
Yeah,
last
I think that's
time?
what
Oh,
we
yeah.
usually do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I can share next if no one else wants to. Just give me one second.
Take it away.
Got you. Oh, don't look at my credentials. Oh, no. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yes.
Okay, so I had Illuminae, I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a 3 book series. This is part 1. I did not look into part 2 or 3, so I only know part 1 of 3. Um, so really the way like this is formatted was really weird. So the way it's formatted, it was like as if you were one of the characters in the book. It's almost formatted like a dossier. So it's a collection of like emails, of interviews, of texts, of like system text. Like as I go on, you'll understand. But it was just really weird. There were a couple pictures throughout and a couple like words, obviously, but just the overall format was really weird. So I tried to match that with this. It's set up like a classified email because it's like a dossier. So pretty much the story is give me one second. Carenza is a small mining planet. Katie and Ezra both live on Carenza. They broke up the day prior, but basically this one company called Baytech, I don't know how it's pronounced. Also, they invade the planet and illegally, and they like overtake it and start mining on it, and they kick the survivors out. So the survivors escape on a couple ships, and then the Bitech sends the warship Lincoln after them because they're trying to like get rid of all the survivors because what they're doing isn't legal. So basically the story follows Katie and Ezra. Katie is going throughout the story trying to get the dossier of information that Bitech had, and she's trying to like tell people about it. She's trying to get it out. So the story just follows them as they like try to evade them and whatnot. So here are a couple quotes. One quote I'll just point out is, "You picked a hell of a day to dump me, Cades." He said that to Cades as like the invasion was going on. The reason I formatted it like kind of like this, like a word map almost, was because that's how the words were kind of formatted in the book. There wasn't like a lot of structure to them. There were some pages where like the words would just flow like as like kind of like this. So there's a couple quotes from it. How it ends is Katie is on the Alexander and the Lincoln is in pursuit, and they're not going to be able to escape, and she knows this. So Katie fires a nuclear warhead at the Lincoln. The Lincoln then realizes that the Alexander realizes that they're on a suicide mission, so the Lincoln then fires nukes at them. They pretty much blow each other all up at the end. Ezra dies, unfortunately, and then Katie is about to die from radiation poisoning, but the computer intelligence called Aiden leads her to an escape pod, and she gets help from it. I don't know what happens after that. That's how the first book ends. If you're interested in the rest, part 2 and 3 are also available. My thoughts on the format, though, I was kind of with Natalie, where like it was really weird, and if you don't have like a prior understanding of like how to read emails or like stuff like that, it was pretty confusing. I feel like this would be sort of difficult for a middle school student just because like I struggled with it, and like so I think at the end of the day, it's not necessarily the most effective way, but it's definitely entertaining. Like I've never read a book like this before. It was really different. It was really unique. But the format just really wasn't for me. But a lot of people liked it, so the format works for a lot of people. So I guess it's just like personal preference. But yeah, that's Illuminae Files Part 1.
Cool. It sounded like an interesting book. Like I like the whole like the world is ending and then there's like a romance too kind of.
Yeah, it's almost like an Ender's Game vibe if you guys have read that or heard of
that's a good
that. Just
book.
like the futuristic spacey stuff like that. Yeah. So the main idea I think from that is, so Katie's trying to tell the world about biotech. I think the main idea from that is do the right thing even when it's hard. So obviously not to this extent of like you being hunted down, but sometimes doing the right thing isn't the easy thing or the, whatever. So I think that's what the main idea of that book was.
It's a good like theme for kids.
Mm-hmm. Definitely applicable to like middle level students.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we could probably go on to the next one. But that was cool. Wait, did it take you a while to do the quote like image?
No, so I just went on a website and you just type in the quotes and then it made it for you and I just screenshotted it. I did no work.
that's
I just
nice.
typed in words. Yeah.
I was like, that probably took you so long.
Took me like 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Was it hard to like get into the book because it's so like formatted
It
differently?
was. It took me a decent amount of time to like actually be like, okay, I have like a decent understanding of what's going on. But like once you get used to it, kind of like what Natalie said, it starts to read a little easier, but like there's just like almost a learning curve into it. And
Right.
it was tough to adjust to, but I got used to it.
Sorry, my cat is trying to get in the picture.
Your cat want to hear about the Illuminae files?
Pretty much. All right. Juliana, did you want me to go or do you want to go?
I'll go.
Okay.
Okay. So I read All of This Is True, and it was kind of written like an interview style or for journalistic articles. So the main characters are all obsessed with this chick's novel that she wrote, and it's her first novel and it's her debut one. And she's a few years older than them, and they like worship this book and her, which is like a little creepy. And then they eventually
Oh no.
Is anybody else frozen?
Oh no.
Yeah, we lost Juliana.
Hello?
Oh, you're back.
Okay. You all cut out for me. Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
You hear
You're
it?
good. We can hear you.
Okay. If any of you were talking, my stuff is messed up. So they're like obsessed with it, and then their life starts to revolve around it, and they meet her and they reveal secrets to her, and then she writes a book about them and some of their secrets, and that like comes back to bite them. And this is like a kind of a spoiler, but not really, because I think it's kind of revealed early on-ish. She reveals the book she writes has a secret about Jonah, and then he gets beaten into a coma because of it. I can't see anything. You're all frozen for me.
Oh no, can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
I don't think so.
Oh no.
Hold on, I'm gonna text her in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Yeah, we can still hear you. You're just frozen.
Maybe she can't.
Maybe she can't hear us.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm not muted. Oh no.
I don't know.
Juliana, check the chat. Check the chat.
Yeah.
Chat.
I wonder if it's like just completely frozen for her. Okay, well, she's moving. Okay, hold on.
I
She's
can hear
moving.
you, but you're frozen for me, but I'm not frozen on my side.
We
Oh,
could
but
we
you
could still hear you even like when we lost you. So
Okay. Awesome. So like he gets beaten into a coma for it. It was weird. Reading it was weird. All the girls kind of sounded the same. They didn't have like a specific voice, even though they put the name at the beginning of their chapters where they were like being interviewed. Which so I wasn't a fan of that. It just kind of blended, I guess. Have anything to say about it?
well, like the plot sounds really, really interesting. Like the whole
Yeah.
like he wrote about their secrets. I think that'd be really cool to like read about. So did you like what the book was about? Did you like it overall?
It was kind of an okay book. It wasn't anything particularly special to me, really. Like the only thing kind of odd about it was the format, and that's
Mm-hmm.
all of these books, really.
Do you think like middle schoolers would like it?
Um, Probably it's kind of dramatic, and I know in middle school you're kind of want drama.
Mhm.
Something I didn't really like is that the author kind of pushed the narrative that you needed to forgive this guy that had sex with someone too young for them, like significantly too young for them.
Hmm.
And the author just kind of pushed that narrative, so I wasn't comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Mhm. I think it's a little aggressive that someone was beaten into a coma.
yeah,
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
pretty rough.
Yeah, it seems like these
It
are
was
like
a surprise.
All the books she's been making us read, they're like all like bad in some way.
I
Do
always
you
choose the odd ones.
Yeah. Do you think that like middle schoolers would have difficulty with the format, or do you think it's something they
Um,
could work with?
I think their difficulty would be in being able to tell who's saying what.
Mhm.
Because at the beginning of each chapter, their name is put there, but they don't have like a different voice for each character, so it's kind of all the same after a certain point. Yeah, I think that'd be the biggest thing. It's mostly interviews and journal articles.
Nice. All right. So now Taylor.
How bad did I cut out for you?
It
A
was
little
just,
bit.
like, yeah, it was just like once in the beginning that we like you totally froze.
Yep, our connection is bad here.
Okay, so mine was The Unfinished Life of Addison Stone, and it was completely an interview, like from start to finish, with some pictures in between. So I formatted mine in like an interview type style. But it was about this girl who was in high school, and was a really talented artist from like the start. And her home life like wasn't that great, so it was like people in her community that like paid for her to go to New York, and then she got like basically like an art deal, and she met like all these different people. But she died, and that's like really like known at the beginning, and they basically you're reading it and determining if it was suicide or if someone murdered her. And so it was formatted in a way that honestly I thought it was real for a second. Like I thought this was like a real story that happened because the way that the author like reported everything. So it was like a, who did it type thing. But yeah, so it was just a lot of things like, so Lucy Lim was the best friend from kindergarten, and was always like really worried about her because she was on medication and then she stopped taking medication. So I think that she was like a bipolar manic. So it showed like struggles with like depression and bipolar. So it was like kind of about like mental health a little bit. Um, but yeah, let's see, Maddie. So there was a situation with Maddie who was her cousin, because like her birth name was Allison Stone, but she was envious of her cousin Madison, and she changed her name to Addison and then made her cousin change her name to Maddie, which was like a whole situation. She was really like daredevil. So there was this whole situation where she like is kind of kleptomatic too because she would steal all the time. And then there was like this famous video of her where she was at like some art museum and she like got on the chandelier and like swung from it to like mimic some real life art situation. And then she had like her art in one of the galleries, and she thought it would be like a great idea to steal her own art and then like in place of the art put like a video of her stealing her art. I don't know, it was weird. Let's see. Like one of my like favorite lines from it was at the end, because she would always like film everything she did. So like when she did like the chandelier, she would film that. And one of her like things about her is like she didn't have a dose of fear. And it ended with her saying, I'm trying to find where I put it. Like I think it was her friend who said that I'm sure her only regret with dying is that she didn't film it. That's kind of like how it ended. Yeah, and then these were like some of her drawings at the end that she did, and that was like her pictured with like one of her boyfriends. But yeah, so basically she's just a famous artist that died, and it was all in an interview style, which was complicated in the beginning because you were trying to learn everybody. And it would say like Maddie, her cousin, but then later on you would have to remember that who Maddie was. So there was like a lot of back and forth, and yeah.
I like what I noticed was like between me, yours, and Juliana's, there seems to be like a theme of like one person who's really successful, but then like their background on like all the stuff they're actually dealing with. So I wonder if that's just like like common for these types of books. Like it makes me think that maybe. That sounds very interesting.
It did sound really interesting, actually.
Yeah, I actually really liked it and I would recommend it. My only issue with it, with like recommending it to like middle schoolers, is the not, I don't know,
Glorification of social.
Yes. Yeah, kind of, and like the romanticizing of her death because of how they framed it at the end. And I'm like, oh, I don't know how I would feel like giving this to, a class and maybe someone in there is struggling with.
Especially at that age too.
Exactly. But if somebody is, bipolar manic, it might help the class to see what's going on in that person's head. So I don't know. I think that there's definitely like pros and cons with it.
Yeah, that's a good point. But you don't want to like glorify that at all to students.
Right. Because I felt like, not that it was glorified because everyone was sad, but the whole thing where she was kind of suicidal, because there was this one point where like she did try to kill herself. So there was just weird things with it that I'm like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think all of them were kind of like that.
How was the all interview format for you? Did that get like tedious at any point, or like did you get bored of it? Or
at the beginning it was rough because I was still trying to learn like all the names, but towards the end when it was just between like 3 people, it got a lot easier.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did they all like have different voices, all like people being interviewed? Like, could you tell who they were?
Yes, because especially like the boyfriends, they would act very differently. And then the best friend was always more or less still talked about her in the like present. So that was interesting. I felt like the friend talked about her in the present and would always have to catch herself being like, well, Addison is, and it would be like the hyphen, it says Addison was. So I caught that a couple times.
All right, should we go on to the next questions?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, so how do these different forms help convey meaning?
I think that they convey meaning in a way that is more interactive, I guess, where, like a traditional book is you read and there's sometimes pictures, but with these type of books, it's like you're almost immersed in their world, like based on the context. So I think that's how they convey meaning.
I think it like adds to like the relationship you have with the character in the book, and it makes it more personal by having this.
Yeah, and I think it's also like a different perspective too, because especially like with the interview, you getting exactly how they remember the situation. So there was like a point in time where all three authors or all three like people being interviewed gave their perspective on like one event and it was completely different. So it was kind of like up to your interpretation, like what actually really happened.
I thought it was interesting how the ones that had like less out there, I guess, stuff had more similar stuff because we had like the interviews and like the online web discussions, and then Zachary had like something involving crazy space stuff, and he had the more interesting format.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
that's
I think
great.
that's an interesting like connection.
Yeah. How would the stories be different if they were told in traditional narrative form?
Mm.
I think they'd be a lot less interesting, like kind of overdone almost.
Yeah, I feel like they would, I don't think they would be like, I don't know, do you guys think they would be more confusing or like harder to understand?
I think it would be the opposite, honestly. Like if like they took away the weird format like that I was dealing with and it was just a normal book, I feel like it would have been a lot easier to follow along, and like
Mhm.
there wasn't a learning curve, and it would have been a lot easier to like get everything in that context as opposed to like trying to like decode whatever the format is.
I agree. Like I think the same thing, but the only thing with my book, it was like I liked that we got to see like what her actual web comic was, because I think that added an element where like we would have missed out on that if it was narrative.
Yeah, I'm trying to picture like how my book would have been in like normal format because I don't know, would you do it from the perspective of, the girl who died, or would you do it just like the full book from like, the
Yeah,
best
that's
friend
what I
or
was thinking about
something?
because yours was like so interesting sounding in the interview style. And I
Yes.
think if it hadn't been, it would have been like If I Stay, which came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Or is the perspective of the person who's like dying.
Yeah. Which I mean, I really liked that book, but
It was a good book.
yeah, it was good. But yeah, I think like overall, like I really enjoyed my book and I felt like I don't think the way it's written is great. Like the format was perfect.
Good. All right. Why might this genre appeal to adolescents? We kind of talked about that too. I
Yeah,
think,
different.
it's
It's
different.
different.
Yeah.
yeah. And it like, I don't know, I think you could have more character development or character like emotion.
More insight into them, I guess.
Yeah.
Mhm.
A lot more engaging too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, I think like we all agree that adolescents love like looking at pictures and like it's so much easier than reading straight paragraphs. What commodities are you seeing? What differences? Oh, commonalities, sorry. Are you seeing in what differences? We kind of talked about this too,
Yeah.
like with the three of our books for sure.
I guess more simple subject material has the simpler forms, and then the more complex or out there stuff has the more complex forms.
Mhm.
Okay. And then like what else do you notice? How might we use these texts to disrupt student thinking? See, like I am not like super into like this type of like genre or like the themes. Like it's harder for me to get into like the um more like, I don't know, like not like imaginary, but like I don't know, like this certain genre personally for me. So I don't know. I actually don't know where I was going with that.
I feel like with this genre, they sacrifice like information, and they sacrifice information for like being different, I guess. And I feel like there's a good and a bad to that. But yeah, I feel like they give up information to make it the way they make it, which is kind of
Like
weird.
background for insight.
Yeah.
You lose some of the background knowledge,
Yeah,
but you
exactly.
get into
Yeah.
their mind more, I
Mhm.
think.
Right. Well, it's kind of like almost like a graphic novel, but not. Like you kind of have to read
Yeah.
between the lines a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah, I think what I was trying to say was that like even though like I'm not a big fan of like the genres, like this format makes it more enjoyable to read, and so I think kids who don't really agree with the genre might like that format.
I think if like they do it in a way that's not overly confusing but is still engaging, I think that this could be like really beneficial to middle level students. But it's a matter of like finding that, special or that just right amount of you know, different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a refreshing, like
Mhm.
if you've read like, 100 novels and then suddenly you read like an interview or
Yeah.
like your Zach, whatever that was called. um
Illuminate.
yes. Then I feel like it's just like different. It adds a little something something in
It's
the middle.
memorable. It's definitely like
Yes.
I'll definitely remember this book like years from now just because it was different.
Right. Which is probably the goal when you're trying to sell books.
And then like how do these stories experiment with form? Like Juliana, what you were saying, how like it seems like the more complex plot lines have like the more complex formats to go along with that. So I just think that's like very interesting that you noticed that.
It was the his visual that like showed me that because he had the text inside something that looked like coding, and I'm just like, what on earth is going on there? Which is probably what it felt like reading it.
That's exactly what I wish I could like show you pages. It literally was like structured like that too. That's why I was like,
Oh my gosh.
you know,
Did you just like open the book and was like, did I buy the wrong
I got
book?
I got to like page 3 and I was like, what is going on? Like, I was
what
like,
did I get
I
into?
was expecting like something different, obviously, but I wasn't expecting to like have to decode
That different.
and
Right.
like that. Yeah, I didn't expect that.
Have you guys ever like read books with this format? Is it?
Mm-mm.
Something
was-
similar, World War Z. It's like interviews and journal articles and stuff like that. Really good book.
Yeah,
Nothing like the movie.
The closest that I've read a book like this, I don't know if you've ever heard of these books where like they're like choose your own adventure books where you pick an option A, B. If you pick option A, you flip to page 80. If you pick option B, you flip to page 90. Kind of like that. That's like the closest I've been to it. But no, this was definitely like the first of its kind that I read.
Choose your own adventure books are really interesting.
Yeah, those sound fun.
I always have to
Just-
cheat because I always die in them.
Yes. Just
I
planning
don't know
out
if
how
I've
you
ever I don't know if I've ever read one of those, so now I kind of want to.
Yeah.
They can be fun actually, but some of them are like really confusing and weird.
I think BuzzFeed has like a shortened version of it on their website. It's like a choose your own horror adventure. Very interesting thing.
Right. Are there any other thoughts or anything? I think like yeah, I talked about or like we all said I think what we were thinking.
I think we hit on all the points. Yeah.
I think
Yeah, I
having
agree.
different formats would result in vastly different stories.
I'm trying to see what like next week's challenges.
I'm also very surprised that none of us had the same book.
Yeah, I was noticing that. I thought that was interesting because yours sounds
it's-
so cool, Taylor.
Highly recommend.
Lord of the Flies, I hate that.
I read the Pigman. It was really easy to get through. So if you're looking for a quick read,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh my god, Lord of the these are all like
The classics.
Yeah. Lord of the Flies is really good too. Outsiders.
Did you hear about the female version of it? It was like beauty queen stuck on an island together.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that sounds fun.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting.
Oh, so the next one's a blog post? Interesting.
Really? I didn't look.
I know.
I looked at the page and then I just didn't pay attention to what I was reading.
Okay, should we?
Yeah, I think we're all good here.
we
Anyone have
are.
anything
Now
else
we're
to
like
say?
checking our other homework.
Yeah, we're
Right.
like doing different classes.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right.
Well, I will see you guys Wednesday.
Okay.
Bye.
See
I'll
ya.
convert it and upload the link again.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Have
All
a good
right,
night.
bye.